Excited to introduce you to our first panel of the day. So if I could just ask our panellists from the brand panel to join me on the stage. So we've got panellists from a number of fantastic brands in youth marketing, and they're going to be joining us to discuss how we can engage the youth market in ideas and not just brands. So guys, if you'd like to join me. Okay. Grab a pew. Okay, so can I just ask each of you, in a really snappy fashion, to give us a little bit of an instruction as to who you are and, where you're from, I guess. Feels like blind date, doesn't it? So, who you are and where you're from, please.
Hi. Sorry, go on. Sorry. So, hi, I'm David Weeks. I work in Microsoft. I'm working the Windows BG team. And I lead from the BG side, I lead the Windows student audience marketing for the last 3 years.
Right, hi, I'm Nicole from the fun job of looking after Jagermeister in the UK. I've been with the brand 9 months. Before that, I worked at Nivea, Mother, Bass, and more brands, so a bit of a diverse background. But back into alcohol, which is always fun.
I'm John Walcott from Waterstones, which is an equally fun job. I've worked in the book marketing industry for most of my career, and I do marketing for them.
Hi.
We get that a lot.
Hi, I'm Daryl. I'm working for myself right now. I'm formerly the VP Marketing for Craft in Europe. So thanks for 2 name checks on Oreo from the previous speakers. Did the Dove campaign 100 years ago and did quite a lot of digital and youth marketing for Cadbury recently.
I'm Mark McGinn. I work at O2 looking after the ethical marketing for the initiative called Think Big. I started my career in advertising and moved across to kind of cause-based marketing some years ago and worked on the Red campaign you may have seen with Armani and Starbucks and Nike and so on.
Wonderful. So who would like to kick off the first panel question? Anybody? No, that would be me again then. That's fine. Okay, so this is one for the total panel. So what do we really mean by youth, and how do you segment this audience for your particular brand or in your previous organisations?
Is that for me, sorry?
For everybody.
Okay, that means me.
Yeah.
So for Waterstones, it means primarily students, I suppose. But of course, there's also a much younger age group who buy lots of kids' books, so they either purchase for themselves or their parents or guardians purchase for them. So we see it relatively straightforwardly. Having said that, of course, any one of those markets is incredibly diverse, so you can't really say there's such a thing as the archetypal student. And they want lots of different things from Waterstones, and we try to provide them.
Excellent, thank you.
From a Jagermeister perspective, I have to say 18 plus, so I've said it. So clearly it's, there's a core target really is 18 to 35 for Jagermeister, and we do split it very much about attitude, interests, TGI data, consumer behaviour, passions, app usage. So we really don't really look at it as a demographic, but more attitudinally first and foremost, but obviously I have that 18 plus that I always have to make sure I'm well above, clearly.
Excellent, thank you.
For Microsoft, we clearly target our audience from 18 to 29-year-olds. Our primary segment is 18 to 24-year-olds, which is about 90% of that segment. So the 18 to 29-year-olds, we include postgraduates in there as well, because they're a big influence. But this year, we've also been trialling some marketing and some tactics at 17 to 18-year-olds pre-university students, really. That has proved very, very successful for us, higher than the university students, in fact.
And how did you find that they differed from university students?
They weren't so opinionated, and they were just really pleased to engage with us. They really love the technology. They're the next generation to come through. So
fantastic. So it's quite insightful.
Yeah. So we've only done 4 events this year. Are you going to talk about that? No. So Lucy isn't going to be talking about that. So I don't want to take too much of Lucy's thunder away. I work closely with Lucy Needham, who's going to talk about a couple of the programs we've done. But that was, we've done 3 this year, and the results have been fantastic. So hopefully we're going to invest a lot more budget in it next year. So.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, well, because there were so many brands, different brands at Craft, the strategy would very much depend on which brand. Obviously, the health profile of any of those individual products. Craft was very ethical about not targeting children and not advertising to children. But at the same time, the bar of chocolate that you grow up with is the one that you want. So it was always very much a balance between marketing ethically, but also obviously wanting to create preference for your product. And that was always a difficult line to navigate.
Excellent. Thanks, Daryl.
O2, we're like Microsoft actually. We focus on 18 to 24 rather than the kind of official definition of up to 30. And again, probably like all our organisations, we cut the group really by demographics rather than age. Mobile, like the guys have been talking about this morning, means that we can also segment down to an individual if we really want to, which I think for all of us is how we'll be marketing in the future. And the segmentations we've all been offering to. There's a chair and a glass. No more, please.
So my ringtone
they hate
off
us.
again if you like.
So in future, obviously, the age is of course relevant because there's a common interest and common behaviours, but we'll all be marketing to smaller groups. And beyond our organisation, it's great to have Lagos in the room. Hello, Lagos. Because I know this is the youth marketing convention today, and 87% of young people are not in the developed world and not in the UK, and that's a different audience, a different agenda. In the UK and in Western Europe, young people, the first generation in modern history certainly, who are going to have it worse off than the generation before them. And they know that, and they're quite pessimistic. But in the developing world, or emerging markets, maybe the right term, it's a very different situation. They've got great hope, they've got great optimism, they know the future's bright. So it's quite a different audience globally for the youth audience.
We did a big global youth survey actually for Took biscuits and found very, very consistent common ground across the sort of 18 to 24s actually. So I think because they've grown up with this sort of interconnected digital landscape, they're arguably more similar as a global group than they've ever been before.
Was that pre-2008?
No.
Post? Oh, really? Oh. So it changes.
Just
our
a
research
point
is
of
different.
view.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you for those insights. Any questions from the floor, please? Like lots. We will get to all of you. Again, can you introduce name and company would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jackie from the Beans Group. So we started today by all answering a question around what is our biggest challenge for youth marketing. And I'd love to hear your challenges.
Sure, I'll go first. I'd say for Jaeger in the drinks industry, it's definitely the fickleness and the fashionability of the drinks industry. So I'm sure some of you might remember Malibu and Coke, or Hooch, which I worked on very many years ago. But basically, it's more, I'd say, it's the fickleness and therefore trying to engage the loyalty, but also remembering that as brands, we live and breathe the brand every single day, and obviously are very passionate about our brands, but it's literally a split second in our consumers' minds. And it's just always remembering that and grounding ourselves a little bit in terms of why aren't they engaging 24 hours a day with us.
Thank you.
I think probably from a Waterstones perspective, we might be lucky because we sell lots of things that people are interested in. We sell ideas and stories, and so it's inherently engaging. But in terms of engaging students in the brand and keeping them engaged in a consistent way, I think that's our challenge, but it's the same as everybody else for any demographic.
So we have a slightly different challenge. So 3 years ago, Windows is obviously an ingredient brand. And not only do we have to market and compete with Intel, AMD, and also the OEM, the original equipment manufacturers, the PC manufacturers, they all want their brand name. So 3 years ago, we obviously worked very closely with the channel, that's our model, but 3 years ago was the first step really we took with the Windows group to invest totally and market our brand, and that was a big step change for us moving forward. There's still some challenges because Windows, if you ask a lot of people and you say, what are you running? Are you running Windows? Oh yeah, I'm running that Word program. A lot of people think Office is Windows, etc. So we had a real challenge, so really trying to make it relevant and educate and inspire as well. So that's where we've taken the direction with that and invest totally as just Windows as a lead brand.
Excellent.
I'm going to generalise massively now. I think it's a huge challenge for any marketer to actually manage the complexity and the tsunami of new stuff. And having sat there, you sort of feel, well, you know, this may be important, this may not be important, and it's very difficult to just organise your time and your marketing appropriately and with focus. And I think what's really important is to get a very clear picture of the structure of the market from the consumer's point of view and their journey to your brand through all of the touch points, whatever they are. And then, you know, kind of identify whether any of this new stuff that seems very exciting is a strategic marketing tool for you or is actually a test and learn, and invest appropriately and in terms of money and effort accordingly. And we did this when I was at Craft with very different results depending on the brands themselves. For a brand like Tassimo, we needed to shift a lot of money away from actually paid for advertising into online video. Alternatively, with Cadbury, actually, we didn't need more of that kind of stuff. We actually needed to get, you know, cardboard boxes, elastic bands, and sticks in store to make sure that people could find the product. So I think this consumer journey and being really objective about where your particular target, whether they be students or pensioners, to be honest, actually come to your brand and what the on-ramps and off-ramps are there is fundamental, because otherwise you can spend, you know, your whole day chasing the latest new thing, and actually when push comes to shove, it isn't going to drive your business. So I think that's the biggest challenge with marketers, is just cutting through the complexity and keeping incredibly focused on the consumer and how they interact with your brand, regardless of what's fashionable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then the effect on your team because of that is so hard to manage a resource. For our organisation specifically, we have a challenge similar to Microsoft in that mobile is huge, it will be huge, it will be how we connect. The trouble for us and all telecos is that the relationship of most consumers, especially young people, is with the over-the-top players, as we call them. So that's the people who exist on the web. So Facebook and Google and Twitter and little guys you've seen up here, Instagram. The hot brands, they're the people that young people associate with, they have fondness with. We deliver the connection, which means those brands exist, but they don't really have much relationship with us. So we have to make ourselves relevant, and that's a challenge, I think, for probably most of the software sector as a whole. And that's a journey we're on.
Fantastic, thank you. So who else put the hand up for a question?
Hello there. Oh. Hi, my name's Hannah Underwood. I'm from an awesome youth charity called Key Fund. In the North East, we are facing huge issues with youth unemployment, and that's the same across the rest of the country. The number of 18 to 24-year-olds who are on the work programme currently in the North East, we've discovered that 66% of them don't have access to email. Now, lots of the stuff today is talking about digital, and I wondered what sort of challenges that might pose or what solutions that you might come up against trying to deal with young people who aren't as connected as maybe the rest of them.
Great question. Who wants to field that one first?
I'll start, that's all right, guys. We're doing quite a work, we feel quite responsible in this space because it's where we are as an operator. You're absolutely right, digital divide is a big issue. It's a key tool set for anyone to get on in life, especially to start their work career, whatever that might be, and bear in mind careers are going to be very different in the future to what they have been in the past. So this is a challenge, and we are working with Mozilla Foundation to create some tools to provide some free online learning for people to become more digitally astute and improve their digital skills. Some of those very basic skills, like having access to an email, is more of a challenge, and we have to work with partnerships, and that's where I think companies government agencies and organisations on the ground like yourselves have to work in tandem, because we don't have the outreach that you guys have in the field to actually sit down with those people, but we maybe can help you guys get connected to those people and make it work. We're also working with Bauer Media, who are obviously a huge youth media partner or media organisation, to create a website called Go Think Big. And Go Think Big is trying to help young people get onto the careers ladder by going to organisations and asking them to create work experience in a more structured way, and then providing the young people with inspiration and then also some tools to help them get that work experience. It doesn't answer your question, that is an online platform, so if you're not online, that's not going to help too much. But we are trying to be a player in this space to try and overcome that divide.
Don't have much to say.
So, Microsoft, we work very closely with the government on getting skills out to youth where they can learn about the technology, understand it. But your point to, they don't have access to email. Every library in Britain has free internet access, and it's about I think a lot of it will be about educating youth to go in there as a starting place to use the schemes that the government are running and Microsoft sponsor, and we sponsor millions of pounds a year to driving that and making software available as well to do it, but then encouraging them to go and use the tools that are available online, to get them online through libraries. I know it's not always accessible, but if they're in town they can always pop in and they can get that free access to it. And there's so many free email providers, whether it's a Microsoft account or a Google account, etc., to help them get their presence known online anyway.
Thank you. So let's grab another question from the floor then for the panel. There's one at the front.
Hello, Manoj Chawla from Uni. I'd like to ask a question to all the panel. How do you find, profile, and reach the early adopters and high influencers in the youth market?
Great question, thank you.
So I don't want to take Lucy's thunder away, but basically she's going to talk about a program we have. We have an ambassador program that we run at Microsoft, and they don't have to be technology experts, they just have to be passionate about technology. And last year, did you talk about how? I'm not going to talk about. Lucy's going to talk about it anyway, but you will, because I don't want to take a thunder. But she will talk about how we've implemented that program, and that's how we get some early adopters and using peer influence then to go and tell that story. Early adopters just naturally progress towards Microsoft. It doesn't matter if they're on a different platform, whether they're running Google Chrome, etc. Early adopters will run multiple platforms. Years ago it was the Linux platform, they would do that, but they would also run Windows side by side. If they're on iOS, they've usually got a dual boot. We sell huge amounts of copies of Windows for people to run on the Apple platform, on the Apple hardware. So we don't really have a problem in getting to that audience, so we can educate that. We just got to make them peer influencers, and obviously we have a preference towards Microsoft to tell our story after that.
From a Jaeger perspective, the early adopters obviously always 18 plus, but basically it's more about understanding who the early adopters are. So really taking on board the point made by my colleague here is the fact that ultimately it's identifying these people who they are as individuals. So it's not just about your brand or how they consume, like how they would consume Jagermeister. It's just really identifying them, and obviously mass media doesn't talk to them. They actually probably reject mass media. So anything that is more mainstream marketing will absolutely not appeal to them. So we spend a lot of time just looking at trends, so a lot of trend spotting, a lot of going to places that aren't mainstream now, and actually some of them might not even be on your radar, but we kind of have we have 200 students that work for us who go around sort of trend spotting and stuff like that, and that's how we spend a lot of time really sort of going under the radar a bit and almost saying, if you didn't have any mass media at all, where are these individuals and who are they? So we spend a lot of time really profiling them and then going to speak to them, but you would never do it in an overt manner because they would just absolutely outright reject you as a brand, especially a mainstream brand.
I completely agree with that. It's exactly true. And a couple of the other speakers, Alistair notably, talked about the need for authenticity in marketing to this audience. And it's absolutely true. It's probably true of any sort of sophisticated consumer, is that their bullshit meter's turned up really high, but it's turned up really high for students. So from a retailer's perspective, you just need authentic, engaging campaigns that are both about your brand but also reach out a bit. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but we're going to do something next month which will run through the course of the year, which is a single umbrella campaign, which we think is engaging across all customer types, but we expect particularly younger people to engage with this very strongly.
Fantastic. Let's move on to another question. There's a gentleman in the middle table just in front of me that's popped his hand up every time, so can we ask his question, please?
Thanks. I'm William Harris from Student Beans. As brands, are there any other brands out there that you particularly kind of envy and you look at and think, I wish I could do that?
There's lots, obviously. One of you guys who came to our research department, we have a big research department at O2, he came from Sky. And I had to shake him by the hand because he was part of the team that originated the Sky bike sponsorship, British cycling sponsorship. Now, we had Red Bull up here. Obviously, that's a fantastic youth brand with an amazing sponsorship program, done brilliantly. But Sky sponsorship of British cycling was a stroke of genius, partly because they spotted a sport that is the most popular sport people just kind of hadn't done anything with. And secondly, they spotted a sport which we're actually good at. Now, we're good at quite a lot of sports now, but we weren't as, that is our pillar sport. And so, as an activation is one thing I think is brilliant, is the activation with cycling, because where they've also put it, they've committed it to trying to take it onto the streets, the Sky Ride, and they've made a real commitment as an elite sport, but also as a sport for everyone to take part in. I thought that was great. I won't talk about any others. There's lots of brands I think are great out there.
I think the O2 Millennium Dome takeover sponsorship was brilliant, actually. It's a while back now, but they've continued to build on that connection with entertainment. I think it's really smart. So, good job.
Wasn't me. Same with you. I think probably if you ask any panel of marketeers for their favourite brands or campaigns, they'll end up with a really long list. And I guess I could name some too. And the two that you both mentioned are great. I would probably say, however, the most important thing is just be true to yourself and your brand, and actually don't worry too much about what other people are doing. Be authentic, because if you spend all your time looking at other people's tactics, you'll never do anything different.
I think from a Jaeger perspective, we like to think of ourselves as quite cutting edge and very cult brand, and there is nothing else in the market like us, so that's quite cool to be unique. But from a purely a marketing brands that I think are really interesting, they are the old cliches, but they're Apple and Nike, because they don't sell the product. I think as brands, very often we kind of end up in that trap of, oh no, you know, it's a herbal liqueur, it's 56 spices, bit of a plug there. But basically, you know, they're selling a lifestyle. It's not a tablet and it's not a pair of shoes. And I think they're the brands that I think if I could emulate that with the brand itself, which I think with Jaeger we're starting to do, then that would be a huge success. Well done.
If I can just jump in, I agree with that completely. I think retailers have a particular challenge in this because the need to sell stuff and to do it in a fairly straightforward way, which does mean buy one, get one half price or whatever your offer is quite big in a window, is sometimes overwhelms the need to actually talk about your brand. So that balance is always very difficult.
I think Marks and Spencer's has done a good job with that with my M&S and stuff. Yeah. That's very much more just about the brand itself.
So for me, probably Red Bull. Microsoft, large company, strict brand guidelines. We have to adhere to a multitude of things, and it does stifle some creativity sometimes of what you can do. There is a very fine line of what we can do. The student stuff we do now is probably, we have more flexibility on what we can do within that brand, or within the Windows brand. But yeah, just to do some crazy stuff like Red Bull do would be fantastic.
Brilliant. We've got time for one more question. You pick.
I'm Ben Kendall from Red Bull.
All right.
There you go. That's quite good.
Round of applause. No, anyway. So this year was our first year of seeing a rise in tuition fees. Have you noticed any consumer changes in trends or consumer behaviours as a result of this?
Well, we've seen it from Microsoft and what we do on university campuses is we've changed. No, we haven't changed tax. We did some research, but we really focus now more on what the software will do for people or students when they leave university. So we have a big educational focus on our tactics now because of the career focus that they do have about jobs. Also, I think Lucy's going to, in the brand ambassadors, so we have 150 ambassadors on campus, which Lucy will talk about. But we've now found that our approach or the way we actually reward our ambassadors, which Lucy will talk about, has helped them get jobs. So this year's ambassadors, I think 4 of them have got internships outside Microsoft, 4 or 5 of them got internships inside Microsoft, so it's really helped them. So we've really adapted the way we approach our student marketing to their career. And we have an opportunity, it's easier for us because we have a set of tools which we can help them with, but without selling.
I think from a Jaeger perspective, various things. Basically, I'm trying to focus on supporting them throughout the year. I think a lot of brands go in there in September, October time, give them all the freshest goodies and talk to them, and like get bombarded, the poor buggers, with lots of bags of stuff. And really it's about talking to them and supporting them throughout the year, because everyone kind of forgets that when you check. I remember when the check runs out at the end of term, you're like, beans on toast. So that's one thing I think that's definitely changing how we do things. The second thing is we recruit 200 students to actually employ them, to actually work with us in the NUS bars and stuff like that. And the other trend that we have seen is that the NUS bars themselves are struggling because people are going out into town a lot more because there's much better deals in town. And they have a bit more entertainment as well, and there's a lot more variety. So we're having to change slightly how we do work going forward with them. But so there is definitely a change in how you have to support them and to talk to them.
I think the answer is yes, probably we are seeing a change in that, and so therefore you have to address how you deal with that. It's definitely true that partly because of the changes in the book market and partly because, as you say, the change in tuition fees, students are spending their money more carefully, and while they don't all read digitally and they do want to buy textbooks, they are nevertheless buying fewer of them. So from our perspective, it's about creating really nice environments, thinking about students more broadly, so it isn't just about a textbook, it's actually about how you might create a social hub where people will come to your store and experience lots of different things, and we'll spend a bit of money on some of our flagship campus stores this year as a result. So I think that's it really, but I think you do need to support them through value a bit differently from the way it's been done in the past, and I think everybody will have to look very carefully at their value proposition and see what it really looks like.
I think as well, when you, because tuition fees have put a lot of pressure on income, kind of looking at examples where that's particularly strong, for example, in young people in Spain, where the youth unemployment is 50%, we looked at that quite a lot for our gum brands, actually, which are under huge pressure because it's a very big discretionary spend and probably in a similar kind of FMCG category to Red Bull. And what we found were just people were desperate for some fun, actually. And we did a campaign which did seem to work, called Pointless Fun, just giving people the opportunity to just break out a bit from the pressure, to provide something that's, kind of not just useful, but also kind of enjoyable. I think you get a lot of credit for that as a brand, where young people, kind of who are, kind of, I suppose, kind of got all their energy of young folk, and yet they can't express that. So if you were a brand in that space, that's what I would give them the opportunity to do. Have some fun.
Yeah, agree. And actually, you're a perfect brand for doing that. Not many people put a man in space and make him jump out of a balloon, but you can. We have seen it. We've seen change, and it's slightly counter to Craft's research, but we have seen in the UK anyway. There is some pessimism amongst younger people. They know how tough it is for them, and it is incredibly tough for them. There's 1 million of them unemployed. We know that it costs 4 or 5 times as much to go to university now, but graduate salaries have dropped by 10%. So the systems are breaking for them. They don't trust the systems. The institutions aren't quite as sacred as they were before. They don't rely on government in the same way. They don't necessarily believe they'll get education from those educational institutes. They can get it online from iTunes U or from the number of MOOCs or the online universities. And they're looking for alternatives in education, in the way they activate themselves with issues, or with charities, whether it be how they associate with brands or with books. So we're seeing a kind of a breakdown and a shift in the way they associate with all the institutions that previously were kind of sacred and you just did. And we mentioned the issue of unemployment. They know that the marketplace is forever changed, and they won't have careers with jobs for life. They probably won't have careers, they'll have a number of careers, and they'll change halfway through, and many of them will have to generate their own jobs. And they are aware of these issues. They don't quite know the way through. They'd like advice, and they're willing to go and get counsel from maybe authorities who weren't previously deemed as experts in those fields, whatever fields they are.
Fantastic. So that brings the end.